Okay, let's get started. Let's do a quick round of intro. You guys are here for a reason, and I think like let's enjoy this panel, let's debate, and let's be spicy with each other. Huh?
So maybe I can start. So hey, for those who don't know me, I'm Gisli, the CEO of Monerium. For those who don't know Monerium, we are a regulated stablecoin issuer out of Europe. We have the URI, the most transacted euro on chain. And we also have a direct connection to the SEPA system, which allows money to traverse from off-chain to on-chain in a matter of seconds. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be here with you today to cover some of the questions that you may have for us.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Hi, I'm Makoto. I'm a developer at ENS, Ethereum Name Service. This is Ethereum event, so hopefully people knows what ENS means. So I do have a name called Matoku.eth, and it provides basically human readable name for the hexadecimal Ethereum addresses. And so if you don't know, if you go to MetaMask, and if you type Matoku.eth, you'll see my Ethereum address to send some ETH or like NFT and stuff. And we started almost modeling after DNS, DNS, ENS, but it kind of started transitioning to so-called Web3 identity. And I actually always wear this, basically my Web3 business card. So I have Matoku.eth, some NFT collection, and if you tap this, you can get a POP badge to say you met me. So if you want to say come hi and just get some POP, just come and see me. And actually, day to day, I work in the protocol team, and currently my focus is mostly on building next version of ENS called ENS version 2 on rollup powered by linear tech stack called Namechain.
Great stuff. A real privilege to be alongside these two guys up on stage. My name's Ian. I look after business development on Linea. Previously, I've been working very closely on MetaMask. And what we did was we took quite a lot of the sort of best practices around things like security and ecosystem building that we had, that we were doing on MetaMask, and we sort of brought those across to Linea. Linea's a ZK EVM rollup. So basically, it sort of, we roll up transactions onto Ethereum. We're the most Ethereum-aligned roll-up in the sense that we have basically no difference between Ethereum and Linea from an opcode perspective. So it's very easy to port dApps and applications across. Anyway, great to be speaking to you guys.
No, it's great because we have actually different kind of useful kind of like proof of points, right? Like we have from layer 2 to kind of like identity to stable. So I think I just want to ask a general question, like what's the state of the infra today? Like where are we kind of like in a good state? You touched Namechain. I'm super interested around also where identity is going. Layer 2, like stables ecosystem is kind of like booming right now, especially salaries to stable back. So how is kind of like the state of the infrastructure today? And obviously like some takes around layer 2s and infra around the ZKVM. It's also like one part of the game around Linea.
Yeah, I don't know where to start. I would say that the infrastructure is maturing quite heavily. It's like just speaking from our own chain, we've had some amazing successes. We enabled ENS names on Linea itself. We've got this amazing partnership with ENS as well, that they're going to be building on the same stack and contributing to the open source stack. So we're really, really happy with that. We've been working with Monerium to get Monerium's URI and GPPE supported, and those are then now being applied into the wallet, into other parts of the service. So, if you, for example, want to spend your euros or GBPs now, you're able to through a MetaMask debit card, and it's starting to become like sort of Mike was mentioning. We're and I know this is probably it applied to ENS earlier because you guys had a product that really found product market fit, way back in the day. But from our perspective, we're now starting to see this sort of appear on the more scalable layer 2s, and we're able to spend stable coins in real world. I'm able to, pay for a cab here in Dubai using stables. And it's just it's fantastic, right? It's starting to really make sense. When I go to my family and they ask what you do, I can now pull out a card and say you can spend it. It becomes more explainable.
It's one of the ultimate kind of like use case also for like general audience off ramping like that. It's something that never existed before. Like we always on ramp, and also like I'm always on ramp, but now it's also like there is actually methods right now that are easier to off ramp. And I think also on the digital identity side, I think Namechain is one of the game, but I think ENS always try to push the boundary to build properties around your ENS name and make it easier for people. I don't know if you want to touch a bit on Namechain, on the Monerium side. Feel free to touch.
ENS chain on the
Namechain.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people know about Namechain right now, and what actually is this about? Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Some people are aware of it. So Namechain itself has announced last year, but we've been working almost 4 or 5 years on the cross-chain interoperability side. As soon as I think roll-up centric, roadmap was kind of proposed by Vitalik, we tried to be kind of basically naming identity layer for across all the Web3 system. And for the last 4 or 5 years, we had some EIP called EIP 3368 CCIP read, which allows basically any chain to be able to store your ENS names, but you can still resolve from layer 1 as a kind of proxy, and that existed almost since 2020. And there's someone when you say linear, you mentioned you issue subnames on linear, that you guys basically use that underlying technology to be able to issue subnames on linear chain. So that can be done actually permissionlessly without relying on us. But we kind of, I think when people talk about ENS, people often talk about .eth, I have my token.eth, and then people see kind of .eth name as a kind of premium, almost like .com for the DNS world, and then that still sits on layer 1, and that doesn't really work for future. We went through the DeFi summer back in 2020. Gas went crazy expensive. That ENS name is $5 per year, but registration costs $100 or $200 and stuff. We also created a novel way to import the DNS name into as a ENS name. So prime example, Coinbase issues cb.id. They imported a domain and internet name and they issued subname onto it. But importing also uses lots of cryptographic things. So actually, I think I'm the first one to import a real DNS name, and it costs 0.1 or 0.2 ETH. It was 2-3 years ago, so it was already quite expensive. So it wasn't very viable. So then we decided to say, okay, so if we, and that technology kind of is, how it works is if you have a name, and if you point the so-called resolver to your favorite chain, all the names minted under that will be minted from that chain. And by doing the same logic, if you move .eth to somewhere else, all the names, which is ETH, token.eth, will be minted from that specific chain. So by using the technology we've been developing for the last 4 or 5 years, if now it's time to move .eth to the new chain, then pretty much by default everything becomes another chain. We had that logic for almost 4 or 5 years, but we are kind of seeing the market, how it evolves, because when Rollup first came up, it was still immature. We are not quite sure how secure it is, and I think I'm glad that you guys said ENS is one of the first product which found the product market fit, and it's actually, we are one of the few protocol which has enough protocol revenue to sustain ourselves by just selling the name, and the name is one of the first kind of intellectual property, and the fact that we stick into layer 1 is that it's good thing and bad thing, but like people, for example, if you go to google.is or amazon.is, it's already squatted by so-called squatters. It's bad, but at the same time, it's all written in smart contract, and we already killed the ability even for development team to kind of seize and take hold. So in that case, we are kind of immutable decentralization. That layer 1 tampers that property, but when you go into layer 2, we still have lots of concern about central sequence and centralization points. So like we're looking at the kind of condition to mature. And I think for the last few years, when ZK will start maturing, we get to the point. Okay, yeah, I think now I think market is ready to finally move most precious ETH to ZK roll like Linear.
Makes sense. And you touched on kind of marketing evolving. I want to understand on the Monerium side, like what are kind of the main use cases that you see around kind of Monerium stablecoins? Because I think like people have different needs, but they're always kind of like evolving in a specific direction.
Exactly. So it's been changing a lot over the years. I don't know if everybody knows, but we've been at it for a long time. We were actually the first authorized and regulated stablecoin issuer in Europe. We got our license in 2019, and the market has changed significantly since then. So, I mean, I think the early use cases that we tried were kind of onboarding, to your point earlier, always onboarding. But we've hit like multiple markets, bear markets, and so on and so forth. So I actually think one of the use cases that kind of made a lot of sense was actually when we turned it around and we said like there's already not a huge, but a small but growing market of users that live on chain, I would say. So the early adopters were already there. These could be the individuals or the companies that were just recognizing most of their revenues in mostly USD-denominated stablecoins, and they would either be Europeans, they would be have European employees. So actually, when we started to reverse the roles to say like, hey, you can swap your USDC into URI, and then make payments to your employees or payouts to your dentist and so on and so forth. That's actually when we kind of took off, I would say. And for those of you who don't know how this works, is that Monerium is tightly connected to the SEPA system, which means that you can go back and forth. And I'd love to demo, or if anyone is interested in building on top of the stuff, it gives you all the power to do so. Recently, however, we've seen a new use case popping up, and it's been cross-border payments. So as we see more stablecoins that are non-USD denominated, specifically, I would like to point out the Brazilian real. I know there's a local one here. Once we start to get to a stage where we have a flurry of different coins, we are already seeing cross-border payments become a use case. And the ones that we're actually onboarding right now are, starting to become companies that are not crypto companies, but they're helping users in Latin America pay their European vendors. And it has nothing to do with crypto, just more efficient rails to do the same things. So that's kind of very interesting to observe.
Super interesting. I was definitely assuming like remittance use cases were one of the biggest one, right?
Yeah, actually as of recently, I would say. But again, to this point, I think what we've had so far is the stablecoin market is pretty interesting because it's 99.8% denominated in US dollars. The euro being 0.1%, and the rest of the currencies, the remaining 0.1%. So right now we're in a position where money moves cross-border on-chain, and it can be off-ramped in certain regions. But this functionality is often very inefficient, and because you need liquidity on both sides. The way we see things and what we're aiming for is essentially to bring this activity of exchanging on chain, right? So what does this mean? This means that you have to be able to connect to the local payment rails in a way that doesn't incur like extra liquidity on both sides. With us, if you move like 1 million euros from your bank account to your IBAN that every customer gets, it will get automatically minted in a couple of seconds in most cases. This means that we can now start to push the exchange activity on chain and use the blockchain itself for the, for accessing the whole world. And we see we have been adding other currencies. Ian mentioned the pound, so the GBPE. We already have a connection to faster payments. After Brexit, there is a slight hiccup with the regulatory certainty there. But we envision a world where all the different payment systems will be connected to a blockchain, and the blockchain itself and stablecoins will be the main conduit of money moving across the world and being exchanged.
What about builders? Like, do you think like they have kind of like enough tooling to build kind of like this specific use case? This is a question for everyone, like on both on the deal side, or on the Ethereum side, or even on the ENS, the AD side.
I didn't get the question.
So like builders, builder-specific tooling, yeah.
So what I can say is, like, to your point, and actually to Mike's points earlier here. So I think we're at the stage where builders, you guys out here, have most of the tooling needed right now. And right now we need to be building applications. Etherfi is doing phenomenal things on that front by kind of repackaging what we have from different locations. I mean, Ian here and his team are doing a phenomenal thing. I do agree. Being able to say to your mother what you do now, like being able to showcase a real-world use case is something that's needed right now. And we know that we probably need to be able to scale blockchains even further. But for the first, I would say, tens of millions of users, we already have the components needed. You can on and off ramp. I don't even talk about on and off ramping anymore. You can move funds from the SEPA system. The 11 trillion euros can now freely flow onto a blockchain without any resistance. It's open, it's permissionless. You have the identity system. You have enough transactions per second to sustain the first 10 million. So in my mind, what we need to collectively do is to have something to showcase. And I think MetaMask is well on the way of having a product that is, can compete with Revolut on many of those fronts. So let's get there.
Yeah, I think that I would agree that we've got a lot of really good building blocks. I think it's like one of these sort of journeys where we keep layering on additional capabilities for developers. I'm definitely seeing, we on the Linea side, we've definitely got like sort of key building blocks around, sort of base custodial services. The core infrastructure itself is there. We've been scaling the network now. We're at about 27.5 MGAS, which is sort of at a higher level of any of the L2s. So there's definitely sort of ability to scale. And then obviously with the work that we've been doing on reducing gas fees and being able to drive the ability to really reduce transaction prices, I think that's another area that's been important. But I think there's always work to do, and I think we've got more work to do around things like sort of making it easier for institutions, for example, to adopt the technology. I think there's that bridge to TradFi that we still need to work on. But I think there's a ton of opportunity now for us to, and I know this has been a bit of a cliche in the Ethereum space, but there is this sort of opportunity at the UI layer, which I think Etherfi, for example, are starting to take advantage of, but really to build fantastic user experiences. We've got a lot of work to do on the MetaMask side to still improve further our UI layer. But I think things like the debit card are like bringing a sort of frictionless use of digital assets to the user, which I think is phenomenal. And I think our strategy around sort of embracing other networks and being able to do sort of more multi-chain use cases is exciting. I think around the debit card as well, what I'm excited about is because users get to hold on to their assets right to the last minute. So you don't have to load up a smart contract, like sort of preload a smart contract or anything. You hold your assets on the EOA and then you spend them. What we're seeing is like lots of little DeFi, like building blocks starting to appear around things like, for example, being able to deposit into borrowing lending and spend the Aave tokens, or being able to, for example, take out a cross-chain loan to be able to spend on the card, or be able to take out microloans and so on. So I think there's a lot of DeFi building blocks that are starting to appear around the main use case of being able to spend. And I think that innovation is going to be much faster than what would happen in a TradFi scenario, because it's permissionless and others can do it. An example to point is like we had a partner who decided to set up a community rewards system, and it didn't really involve us. And so right now you can go onto a community rewards program and you'll get a certain percentage back in your spend in sort of community tokens. So and that was just done permissionlessly, and it creates awareness for those tokens. So I think it's quite there's a lot of stuff that's there, and we've got a lot of ability to innovate, and I think there's just opportunity to make use of it whilst we still build the infrastructure.
So this is like how builder tools or environment has been evolving basically in my area.
Yeah. Could be all the IDs. I'm assuming that you're seeing a lot of like ENS developers or even people building digital identity use case.
Yeah. So like I think there's a few points that like ENS has been kind of de facto identity system for Web3 system, but we've been seeing some difficulty adapting for the layer 2 cross-chain lookup. That even though like as long as people are using EOA, like it's externally owned account, which like currently like if you create MetaMask wallet, that's what's been done, deriving from private key, public key to the address, which is inherently cross-chain. So people actually treat like even though you set ENS name for layer 1, if you could just resolve any other chain. However, with the rise of all these smart accounts, it's a contract based, so each chain could have different unique addresses, and people still not using lots of smart account, but especially in the area of like high value holding things, especially like safeness area, that start coming to cross-chain, and people seems a bit hesitant to use, because I think earlier in the day there's some securities and like people try to send the address resolved to try to send to this address, but instead sent to the wrong chain and it just went to the hackers. I think there's a couple of incidents that made people nervous about specifying Ethereum, like sending cross-chain, and also people might be a bit hesitant to do cross-chain name resolution. We are working on something called layer 2 specific so-called primary name system, which is going to address it. So we still haven't, it's almost there, like it hasn't released yet, but like we are a bit behind, but like, I think we can catch up on that. That's first thing. For the builders environment is that basically ENS has been one of the oldest protocol launched in 2017, and we tie into the DAO to 2021, I think. And we have a DAO managing our registration treasury, start distributing kind of funding for the public goods ecosystem, and I work at ENS Lab, which is a company who launched the protocol, and we also, all the protocol revenue doesn't go straight to us, it goes to the DAO, and we basically present the case to the DAO to us funding, and nowadays the more ecosystem get matured, I think there's now several companies who's in a similar situation like service providers and getting funded directly from ENS DAO. So like if you try to build the, I think, area in identity area, there's a good, not just for the tools available, but also funding are getting available. So I think that's a good time to start building something on identity build.
Do you think every agent need to have an ENS name?
So when you go to hackathon and stuff, I think half of the, well, not half, but like I think 30% of submission is about AI agent nowadays, probably 50%. And then I think the first thing we suggested is why don't you issue something for the agent? And before we didn't have proper supporting tool, but we have something called During.dev, which makes you easier to issue subnames. So like, yeah, why not? Like, not just names, issue like every machine agent. Everybody should have ENS for everybody.
Yeah, especially some like entities creating value for users, developers. No, it's very cool. I mean, anything that you guys are excited about, you want to share before we kind of like get some question from the audience?
Yeah, I'm just really excited. Like it's going to be announced tomorrow that what Ian shared earlier here today is that the URI and GPP will be spendable on the MetaMask card. I think this is a fantastic point that we're getting to. I think this is only the beginning of what's possible. I think we're at an inflection point where where we need to start to show the world what we can do. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, I do agree with you, Ian, that we don't necessarily there's still more to do. But at the same time, we have the components needed. They need to be repackaged. They need to be combined in a way that is intuitive for the user. I'm just really looking forward to seeing what the next couple of years will entail with the likes of ENS, which I use myself. It's a fantastic project. And as to your point, we've deployed on Linea, and I can confirm that it was no different than deploying to Ethereum. So let's just make sure that DeFi succeeds.
I know, Francesco, you've been around the block for a long time, and you do a lot of these events. What's your feeling about how we are, where we are with developer tools and tooling from a sort of DevRel perspective on the MetaMask side? How do you feel things have developed?
That's a good question. I think process is getting definitely automatized. On the developer onboarding, we kind of build AI searches for docs. We see LLM starting to querying more and more data specific from docs, right? We start building pre-compiled templates, CLIs for actually making life easier for developers. I think that's one case. But I think the space obviously is we're getting all this hype around agents that mostly
it's clearly on your mind, isn't it? This AI agent.
I know.
You must have done a session on AI agents earlier.
I did a lot of sessions on that, right? But I also think there is a need to start building automation, because a normal user will not go on chain and try and expecting him to kind of transact between 2-3 multi-chain. Will not happen. Either there is some kind of
background agent to actually help running those transactions. But I don't think this is still enable a lot of friction. That's why
yeah, but the idea is then that the AI would just obfuscate the complexity of the sort of the layer 2s and the fragmentation you're seeing is basically what you're saying.
Yes.
And possibly even across wallets and stuff like that.
Yes. I think and also explaining and transparency around kind of transaction. There are different things, but I think making life easier for the user is also one part of the game. I'm excited about stuff delegation toolkit. I think one of the biggest use case right now that is happening, and it started already to happen with creation of smart accounts, is delegating actions to other users to do something. So trigger action is a big thing, but frameworks for actually delegating and building delegation, I don't know, apart something like a MetaMask delegation toolkit, I didn't see that much around, because right now you can build basically smart account specific for delegating finance actions. But think about you can actually building we're calling it caveats. Basically you're building any events trigger, and you can actually give specific action and rights to do and execute something. I think this is super exciting.
Yeah, no, I'd love to get to a point where we're able to almost replace, in the UK we have a direct debit system where you sort of approve spend from your bank account. But if you could just sort of delegate, if I could delegate, to my mobile operator how much they can spend a month, or to my insurance provider and so on, all of that stuff, I think it really starts to open up yet more real world use cases for the use of and get us away from just the casino, right?
Yeah, and even people think about like MetaMask card being kind of like an off-ramp, like off-ramping methods, but there is so much more because having a non-chain kind of like a layer that does off-ramp. It's basically like a passport. It's a DID that actually is attached to your actually ENS account. You can actually build so many different apps and use case because this ENS, this kind of like digital identity account has a track record. Think about like restaking, like staking a specific kind of action. So it actually like there is so many interesting things on Web3 Rails you can develop attached to a use case like that.
It just sounds like we're still early.
We're super early. We are even like in 2 months we're running this MetaMask card hackathon where we actually like wanna have this use case being built around the card, right? Because this is a method, it's a DID method at that. So I think even DID, thanks to actually something like a card, thanks to kind of even like start building social reputation, so open attestation. These use cases are starting to get more and more important. And we saw with DeFi Summer, when people fork indexes, they were kind of like ragging users because they didn't know the track record. And I don't want to go back on agents, but like we need to start seeing like social reputation and public attestation for agents, because if not, we will going to and seeing like forks of the forks. So the forks that will start kind of ragging people if it's a DeFi agent.
No, we're just going to have the same bot hell that we've got on Twitter right now, which is like every second reply is basically botted, and it almost becomes unusable, right? So we do have to sort of like this ability to identify and then have almost like a sort of proof of agent or proof of reputation, proof of agent, proof of humanity type sort of systems. I think make a big difference.
Actually, I think when Linear team did the subnames, you guys use like I think proof of humanity to be able to issue subnames and kind of combat against like spamming stuff. Like whenever you try to issue subname, because most subname is free, it's just taken by bots. But I think you guys already pioneered.
Yeah, we put in a proof of primarily the proof of humanity was there to stop Sybils from claiming point systems and all of that sort of stuff. And making sure that real users were getting rewarded and not just sort of these bot farmers. So that was the primary use case, but we're pretty happy with that, and we sort of worked very closely with Nansen and a few others to build out. And we used an attestation service called Verax, which has been super powerful for us to be able to gather enough attestations to prove that the person's a human being. But I think with AI. We're going to have so many deep fakes of all sorts of levels coming at us, and DIDs, proof of humanity, are going to be, and having this, track record of good behavior, let's say, or ethical behavior on chain is going to become super important. I agree with you.
I couldn't agree more on that front. And I think this is essentially the correct foundation to build, everything on top of it. Because as we have today, like we have in TradFi, we have KYC processes and other things, but they're so cumbersome. And one of the things in DeFi or on blockchains is that you're able to kind of connect your wallet and seamlessly start to get some services from some different protocols, right? And I think this is what bankers have the hardest time to understand, is that everything is being, put on its hat, if you will. Because for the first time, the bank is not the center point. It's your account. And you can choose to attach different services to it. ENS name, some staking services. You can add your IBAN from Monerium. But if that doesn't work out for you, you'll have a competing product soon, I would guess. So you can effectively kind of mix and match those things. And I think the sort of holy grail will be when we have a system where the KYC can be layered on top of this, meaning that you can seamlessly move between applications, whether they're all integrated or not, and prove that you are who you are, because many of the KYC practices that we have today just aren't working very well.
Authentication is not.
They didn't authenticate. Now I was going to ask, whether current KYCs, are they just going to get absolutely hammered by these sort of deep fake? Because I'm seeing sort of deep fake IDs now, and you can just sort of almost like DDoS like these KYC systems, and like how on earth are banks going to manage to sort of sift through when, let's say, 19 out of 100 applications are fake, and the amount of effort that's going to go into the check. I'm just curious to see if that is becoming a problem or not.
So it is actually. We've started to see some really good, deepfakes that are slipping through. Even the best of the, you have your identity verifiers that kind of try to figure out if the picture on the card is the liveliness check and all of that stuff. And some of them are actually slipping through. And what we had to learn a little bit a year ago when we started to onboard many scammers. So these weren't Web3 scammers at all. They were just taking the advantage of Monerium being the fastest IBAN provider around. So we started to look more into on-chain metrics, actually, when we were doing the onboarding. Do they have a track record of transacting? Do they have an ENS name? And you can start to get a really clear picture. Is this, a likely DeFi user or not, right? And I think, at least from our experience, that these are likely the tools that you need. You will have your account and you will be able to attest to from different sources. KYC providers will be one of them, but obviously your track record within a community or something else will also factor into your score. So yeah, to answer your question, it's already a headache.
Cool. Any question from the audience? I see everybody's kind of tired here.
Time for dinner.
Time for dinner, exactly. We're good to go? Any lesson learned that you want to share with the audience? Anything? We're good? Okay, sounds good. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Big round of applause.